I really feel like they are like an herbalist's herb. They're a plant kin that so many of us feel really deeply connected to.
Hello and welcome to the Herbs with Rosalee podcast, a show exploring how herbs heal as medicine, as food, and through nature connection. I'm your host, Rosalee de la Forêt. I created this YouTube channel to share trusted herbal wisdom so that you can get the best results when relying on herbs for your health. I love offering up practical knowledge to help you dive deeper into the world of medicinal plants and seasonal living. Each episode of the Herbs with Rosalee podcast is shared on YouTube as well as your favorite podcast app. Transcripts and recipes for each episode can be found at herbswithrosaleepodcast.com or through the link in the video description. Also in the video description, you'll find other helpful resources. For example, to get my best herbal tips, as well as fun bonuses, be sure to sign up for my weekly herbal newsletter. Okay, grab your cup of tea and let's dive in. First up is the Herbs with Rosalee Student Spotlight. Each week we take a moment to celebrate one of our amazing students and their inspiring contributions to our herbal learning community. This week our spotlight shines on Elia Seeley in Washington State. Throughout 2024, Elia was an insightful participant in our Rooted Medicine Circle course, sharing her deep curiosity and love for the plants. For her capstone project, Elia created a story quilt, this beautiful fusion of herbal learning and textile artistry. Though she was already a garment sewer, quilting was new territory for Elia, making this a project of both skill and discovery. Using tea-dyed muslin, applique, and embroidery, she stitched together her journey in Rooted Medicine Circle, layering it with inspiration from the course and a deep connection to her grandmother, who was a master gardener. To honor her contributions, Mountain Rose Herbs is sending Elia a $50 gift certificate to stock up on their incredible selection of sustainably sourced herbal supplies. Mountain Rose Herbs is my go-to for high-quality organic spices, herbal remedies, and even hard-to-find botanicals. They ship all over the U.S. and have a massive selection of products to fuel your herbal adventures. Thank you, Mountain Rose Herbs, for supporting our amazing students. If you'd like to explore Mountain Rose Herbs' offering and support this show, you can find the special link in the show notes. You're about to listen to a lovely soul who has a deep connection to the earth and the plants. She also really knows her stuff. This conversation ranged from listening directly to the plants and beautiful stories to how prostaglandins affect the menstrual cycle. So in other words, we covered a lot. This was my first time meeting Dr. Jacqui, although I've long been admiring her beautiful and heartfelt posts on Instagram. Seriously, if you need a boost of beauty and wonder in your day, just take a meander on her page. For those of you who don't already know her, Dr. Jacqui, ND, is a mixed Indigenous Yakima, Irish, and Eastern European naturopathic doctor, plant medicine person, birth worker, teacher, and steward of the earth. She tends to the Halish Medicine Garden on Vancouver Island, which is the Sanemo territory, crafting plant medicines through Halish medicines and honoring her mixed lineages of earth and stars. She shares wisdom of earth-based practices, plant medicines, ancestral reverence, and earth tending, remembering we are nature, not separate from creation. Her intention is to help us deepen connections with the land, our ancestors, and all relations, bringing healing, harmony, and a sense of belonging. Jacqui, I'm so excited to have you on the show. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so excited to be chatting with you today.
Yeah, I'm just really excited to see where this conversation flows. And I have questions for you. I have things I'm excited to dive into. And the first one is hearing about you and your plant path and all that's brought you here to us today.
I love this question so much. I love hearing other people's, origin stories of their plant path. So many of us, it's really a journey to kind of get here. And so I'll try to keep it kind of concise because for me it was kind of, and I think for many of us, like a winding path of really finding our way back to the plants. So some of my earliest memories were working with plant medicine, sitting like, not in a sense of like how we would like as like maybe like herbalists, but really sitting and connecting with the plants and communicating with the trees and, just spending time with them and engaging with them and And, I remember like sitting with like cottonwood and, like smelling the cottonwood buds or like sagebrush and just really deepening those relationships and connections. Um, and it wasn't for quite some time. So this was like my really early childhood. And as I got a little bit older, I realized, that maybe not everybody could speak to the plants or hear the plants in that way, or maybe that not everybody wanted to as well. And so I kind of got this sense that maybe it was, for lack of better words, like a strange or like weird thing to be in that like deep connection, which speaks so much. And we could take that on so many different paths and levels. But I didn't really have elders or mentors in my life at that time to mirror that, this experience of really hearing the plants, hearing the land, being in that deep relationship and connection was like a natural state of being for many of us, and just part of being in relationship with our environment and the land and the beings around us. And so for a while I kind of veered off of that path because I didn't really have you know that mirroring or that mentoring. And I was really trying to, kind of find my way in my teenage years, early 20s, and kind of veered towards all things like art and beauty. And I was a makeup artist for quite some time, which I also really love so much. And I still was working with the plants, but I didn't have, again, that language. So at the time, I didn't really know what an herbalist was, which I know maybe now seems like unfathomable. But growing up in so-called Montana, I didn't have that modeling of even like an herbalist as like a career, for lack of a better word, there. And so I was working with the plants in a very informal way. So I would like I remember sitting at the kitchen and like my family kind of sharing different ailments that they were going through or things. And I had like a little book and I had some loose like herbs. And I would just be like, okay, like doing an intake essentially, which I didn't realize that's what I was doing at the time, and kind of like creating a formula. And one night, so I was a makeup artist at the time. One night I woke up in the middle of the night in my early 20s, and I just felt this strong urge that something big needed to change. And I wrote down all of the things that I was kind of calling in or feeling called to, and part of my work and purpose and why I was here in a way. And that led me to naturopathic medical school. So at the time, that was the only real way that I could think of to work with plant medicine, as I knew naturopathic doctors worked with botanical medicine. So I was like, okay, I guess I have to become, a naturopathic doctor. And so I kind of dropped everything, moved to Toronto, and started the prerequisite program for naturopathic medicine. And I heard the plants, throughout, kind of guiding me to start a medicine garden and begin learning from the plants that way, and really, deepening again those relationships and connections. And so, yeah, I always kind of say that it was really the plants who called me on the plant path, which I think is, true for many of us, of like, it's almost like a remembering or like a coming back to ourselves. So I remember sitting in like a formulating class for botanical medicine and being like, wow, like this is what I've been doing. Like this is the, intuitive process that I didn't have words for, that I didn't know was even, a thing. And so, yeah, it felt like a belonging. And I think many of us feel that when we come back to the plants and come back to herbal medicine, of like this homecoming really to ourselves and also to the earth, which, gives me goosebumps because it's just, yeah, it's such a beautiful gift and beautiful feeling. So yeah, that's a little bit of kind of how I got started.
That I literally have goosebumps too. You said it in such a beautiful way, and I feel like we have entirely different like backstories, but the trajectory was the same, and that like I can also pull apart like feeling that connection to plants as a kid, but not knowing what to do with that. And then it's like, and I have these like moments that are very clear in my mind of like when the plants reached out and said like, this way, but it took a while. It took like several nudgings to like find it. And then and I've heard that a lot, through the stories that people tell, which I just think is really fascinating, because it really does feel like that there's like this path that like we're walking and like we're kind of getting nudged over and over towards it. And it kind of gets louder, like it gets louder and louder as we go forth. But that sense of belonging that you talked about, Jacqui, is just really beautiful. And I think that is, I don't know, when we like come into that realization, and that is such a beautiful feeling. And I'm excited to talk to you more about that as the conversation goes on as well. Well, the plant that you've shared with us is, I think, one of the most fascinating plants out there. And it's actually my plant ally for the year.
Mm.
So I'm really excited to hear what you have to share about yarrow.
Yeah, I love that. I love that so much. The way the plants really like align too,
Mhm.
and connect us. Yeah, so they're one of my favorite plant kin as well. I feel like, and I pronounce it. Sometimes I go back and forth, and I feel like this is one of the things that I'll just say at the beginning because I may go back and forth with pronouncing yarrow, so yarrow and yarrow,
Mm.
and I feel like it depends like where you're at or like where you grew up or like the people you're around because I've noticed different places pronounce and then I end up going back and forth. So if I do that, that's probably why, which I love and maybe speaks to their medicine so much too in that harmonizing aspect and so much paradox and kind of different ways of being. But I really feel like they are like an herbalist herb. They're a plant kin that
Mm.
so many of us feel really deeply connected to. And they're a plant that for me, it took me a few years to really deepen that relationship. When I first met Yarrow and learned about them in school, it was kind of like not such a deep connection. Like I, enjoyed their medicine and it took me like a few years to like really, really deepen that relationship of like connecting with them and receive some of their teachings directly. Um, so one of the aspects I love so much about them too, and especially for, well, for us all, but even like beginner herbalists and plant people, are that, many of our ancestors have worked with yarrow for healing as they grow, worldwide and are indigenous to so many places worldwide. So many of our ancestors, kind of like wherever we may have come from or wherever we may be, have worked with yarrow. And so I find that they're a plant that helps us remember our shared connections. So they help us remember, that we all share the earth and that we all have that in common. And so that sense of commonality, as well as also uniquely connecting with our lineages and our own ancestors and like that blood memory and like the blood, which of course we know yarrow has such a beautiful affinity for the blood as well. And so when we work with yarrow we can remember those connections and remember our interconnection with one another and with the land, and also awaken like those ancestral memories that we all carry too within our blood. And so there's not only like that physical aspect, which I also love so much of like the styptic and being able to, stop blood, as well as I love the paradox of being able to also like move blood and move circulation, but also really, yeah, connecting with them on that energetic and ancestral level too. So kind of the physical and the like spiritual weaving together, which it just feels like such a big part of their medicine.
Mm, that is so beautiful. I love how you started that with the connection of our ancestors and the different lands that yarrow grows on. And it's one of the plants that have been found to be like in archaeological digs that have been found to have been a part of medicine for untold thousands and
Mhm.
thousands of years too. So that's, I love that because it's hard for me to even wrap my mind around that, really. So that's a wonderful, beautiful place to start with yarrow. And yeah, and touching on that, just really fascinating aspects of it. I think uh, it's so interesting to learn about plants and their energetics and how they work. And I think one of the things that helps that I've learned so much from yarrow is that we cannot really classify yarrow.
Mhm.
It's beyond that, and I think many plants are, but yarrow, that seems like a teaching of yarrow, is that it's showing us, we cannot call it, that we can't say it stops blood without also
Mhm.
mentioning that it moves blood, and then to hold the nuance of the two of those together is a really special thing, and just really showing the complexity of the plant themselves.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. I love that aspect so much of their medicine, like that, those reminders to like within ourselves of holding the complexity within our beings and like that paradox within our beings, like almost like reminding us that we can be all of who we are and we don't have to
Mm.
kind of like fit into a box, which I think so many plant people and herbalists and just people in general really appreciate too, because so often we don't really fit in just like one way of being, right? Like we hold multitudes, as does Yarrow. So yeah, I love
Mm.
that so much about them.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah. What else would you like to share about yarrow and medicine wise, or maybe just how you like to work with it or be with the plant?
Yeah, yeah, there's so I feel like there's so much. So it was, in sitting with what kind of wanted to come through with working with them. The affinity with the blood, of course, like many of us work with them in this way and keeping them in our first aid kit and working with them for like wound healing. So they're one of my favorites for, blood in general. And I remember one time being on the land going bush camping or backcountry camping with my little one, and we were portaging across some rocks and going into a different lake to get to the campsite. And he was younger, like around 4 or 5 at the time, and just like cut his ankle. And it wasn't like a really deep cut or anything that we needed to get the first aid kit out because it was like packed away on the canoe already, and but it was bleeding enough that I didn't have anything really to bandage it. So I look around and I'm like, okay, who's growing here?
Mhm.
Like who do I recognize, who's around, like plant wise, that we could work with. And I think even that aspect of getting to know the plants who are in our community, in our environment that we're around, growing around us all the time, or so often that we're in relationship with, is big medicine in itself. Just knowing that we can rely on them and connect with them. And so I looked around and saw yarrow growing, and so I went and harvested just a little bit, crushed it up, put it on the cut, and immediately stopped bleeding and added a little bit of antimicrobial. So like I felt, better until we got to where we were going. And then also had a little bit of that analgesic quality, or kind of like reducing pain just a little bit too. And for me, I love that story because so many of us have these stories with yarrow, and how potent they can be in wound care, and bleeding, hemorrhaging, postpartum, things like that too. But it also just reminds me of that relationship that we have with the plants, and sharing that with maybe the children in our lives too, and reminding them from like a young age of that empowerment of like these
Mhm.
plants are helpers, and they're around us, and we can get to know them, we can care for them, and be in relationship with them. And then when when needed, they're there for us and they hold us. And that gives me goosebumps too. But it's just so impactful, um,
Mhm.
to have these relationships. So I find yarrow are one that often really come through, to hold us and really care for us, especially when we may be kind of questioning our path, or finding our way back to our path, or feeling extra sensitive, or extra um, yeah sensitive, or empathic, kind of taking on energies. They can really hold us.
And when you're talking about that was a great story, about, yeah, being able to look at the plants around you. And I feel like that was a turning point in my life to be able to do that.
Mhm.
I didn't grow up looking at the plants around me and being able to rely on them. And the level of reciprocity and interdependence that comes from that relationship is such a beautiful thing, and kind of just why I keep showing up every day. I want everyone to experience that. But as you were saying that, I just realized yarrow is probably my most used field medicine.
Mhm.
It's probably the plant I've turned to the most for that. Of course, there's like plantain I would also think of, but I
Mhm.
do a lot of more, back country, and that's where the yarrow is versus the
Mhm.
plantain typically. So yeah, it's just like as you were saying that, I just felt like a lot of gratitude for yarrow to be like, oh yeah, I've also
Mhm.
relied on yarrow for serious situations sometimes, and it's a yeah really powerful thing to have that plant as your friend.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that so much about their medicine. There's another story, if there's time
Oh,
to
I
share.
would love to have
Yeah.
a
Okay.
story. Yeah.
Okay. One of the reasons, there's so many plants that we love, and that we could share about in so many different ways, but yarrow really stood out as having so many stories, and like that story medicine aspect with them. So another time I was out, on the land, and I grow yarrow in the medicine garden too, but was on kind of like just a little like hike, and there was like a meadow, and there was a beautiful patch of yarrow. And sometimes a plant just calls like a specific like flower, and they're like, just like harvest a little bit, even just to connect with as we're walking or whatever that may be, respectfully. And so I went over to them, was just sitting with them, really still felt that call to like harvest. I didn't have anything for harvesting as I was just out for a little walk. And so I kind of like I have some here, kind of like went to like, they're dried now, but went to like clip with my like nails and uprooted the yarrow stalk. And it's like, oh my goodness, like, sorry, like replant and like put the soil around, as I didn't mean to uproot them. And I heard them kind of nudging me to harvest the root. And for me, that was like a big like moment of, really listening to the plants when they're sharing with us. And there's a blend of like that intuitive knowing and listening, as well as like the clinical knowledge and aspect that can come. And I hadn't worked with the yarrow root in like at all before. And I knew that, it, has medicinal aspects and people have worked with and work with yarrow root, but I hadn't. But they were really adamant about harvesting the root. So I was like, okay. And there were clear directions to make a bath for moon time, for cramping, upcoming like moon time, like a week or 2 weeks, whatever it may have been at the time, and to make a bath to support clearing and really bringing kind of like that healing and astringent aspect to the tissues, and also the energetic holding. And so I harvested the root, brought them home, dried, and kind of, went about like life. And then I heard them call again to make that bath. And so I was like, okay, well, let me just like taste the root a little bit and see, because that's one of the ways that we can get to know a plant. If we know that it's okay to taste them, is just to taste. And immediately I felt kind of like that tingling on the tongue. So then I was like, okay, there must be, some of that like analgesic, like was reminding me of like some of that like pain relief, as well as like inflammation reducing, which are things we would probably think of with yarrow anyway. And then after spending like a little bit more time with them, I was like, let me dig into their medicine a little bit. So sometimes I love just spending that time of getting to know them directly without delving, right into the books or like right into like, researching them in research mode, of just really allowing that connection. And so I came across the constituent chamomile, which is really high in the root, which we know is, a part of the volatile oil of like yarrow, the foliage and the flowers. And so then like this aha moment of the chamomile, which is like it's like the blue. So I have some of the blue, I don't know if
it's
you
beautiful.
can see it here, of the yarrow oil, which the chamomile is also found in chamomile. And so kind of that shared connection of the like a mild pain relief as well as reducing inflammation. But the aha moment paired with like the menstrual cycle was chamomile's ability to actually inhibit prostaglandin synthesis. And we know people who have more like cramping and discomfort related to periods often have higher prostaglandins, and the root topically as well as internally can actually inhibit prostaglandin synthesis. So reducing the cramping, reducing the spasms, and also acting as an inflammatory, of course, then the bleeding aspect there too, as we know with heavier bleeding, there's often higher prostaglandins too. But it was a beautiful moment on the land with yarrow, and just those reminders of weaving our knowledge and the wisdom that we have with also being able to really attune with the plants and listen directly to the plants and how they're guiding us. And there's just been so many times with yarrow and other plant medicines where they've almost shown me how to work with them. And then I kind of find my way from there, but it's them really doing kind of the teaching, which I really just love and appreciate so much.
I love that story about the root. And I've never worked with the root, and it's my plant ally this year, as I mentioned. So now I'm really inspired to work with the root. So thank you for sharing that story. And I'm curious, just because you held up the beautiful essential oil of
Mm,
yarrow,
mhm.
how do you work with the essential oil?
Yeah. So often I'll like there are various ways, but kind of like as a anti-inflammatory and like antispasmodic. So topically, like with oil or like in a salve, and
Mm,
working with that like over kind of like any like colic or spasms. So whether that's like menstrual cramps or whether that's like intestinal kind of like GI colic and cramping can be really really soothing. So sometimes
nice.
I'll mix them with chamomile and do that kind of over the stomach. Or if someone, well, I have had kind of like a food poisoning, or my little
Interesting.
one having some colic, and kind of diluting, and working with them that way,
Mm,
or else over like bruising and things like that too.
mm,
But I really love their action on easing cramping, and that's something that we often don't really associate with yarrow. Like we often kind of go straight to like the blood, and
mm,
like the wound care, but they're really really beautiful at supporting the spasms and just a mild pain relief. So in Anishinaabe tradition, one of the ways I learned later of working with the root, is also as a poultice. So for like sciatic nerve pain, and
interesting.
so again, kind of like bringing in some of the nervous system support on the nerves,
Mhm.
and reducing inflammation around around pain around the nerves as well.
Mm.
So yeah.
Oh, that's fascinating. And I love that you brought up chamomile too, because chamomile is like my like deep-hearted plant ally for all time. And I love chamomile so much. And I think chamomile is underrated for things like cramping. And it's actually
Mhm,
one of my most recommended herbs for moontime cramping.
mhm,
And so that was really fascinating for me for you to draw those lines together of
mhm,
the shared chemical bond that they have or containment that they have. And then I was just about to ask, do you ever combine the two of them? And you
mhm,
said it that you did. So I was like, oh, interesting. But yeah, and that, yeah, just as you said, I don't think of yarrow when I think of cramping.
mhm,
I didn't before, but now I'm going to. So thank
mhm.
you for sharing that as well. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, this is really fascinating. You're sharing things I did not expect to hear, so it
yeah.
makes me even more excited for my plant ally this year.
I love that. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's yeah. Oh, I love yeah, when those moments happen of inspiration and excitement to get to know like our plant kin. And it's
Mhm.
a reminder too that like we're all continually learning. And I love that about being a plant person or an herbalist also, is that we're
Mhm.
continually learning about the plants. And sometimes I'll think like I know a plant like so well, and I always am learning. We can know them so well, but they're like people, and that
Mhm.
we're always getting to know them and getting different, yeah, different versions of them or different parts of their medicine that come through too.
That's so true. I love not knowing it all because
Mm-hmm.
it just makes every day so much more fun and exciting. And it also helps me hone my curiosity because it can be easy
Yeah.
to just know what you know, I guess, but the I'm
Right.
constantly reminded to keep the curiosity open
Mm-hmm.
and to hear and yeah, and to be pay attention with moments like this where I'm pointed in different directions.
Yeah.
I speaking of like yarrow and thinking like, oh, I know this plant. I recently have been having a lot of the tinctures, and I was having this one tincture, and then I switched to another tincture, both of yarrow, and the taste was so dramatically
Mm-hmm.
different. And I feel kind of silly saying this because it was just so obvious, but I like, checked out the 2 bottles and one was fresh and one was dried. And
Mm-hmm.
that was just like, I know there's a difference between fresh and dried tinctures. It's something, but it was just like this moment of like, oh, wow, like really experiencing the difference between that and highly preferring the fresh tincture.
Mm-hmm.
Just the aromatics came through in such a beautiful way. And it just felt like a more direct connection to the plant in some ways. Like it just felt more of like, oh, this is really yarrow here.
Mm-hmm.
Both are yarrow, but yeah, as the fresh just was really speaking to me. I'm curious, do you work with yarrow as tincture or as a tea? Both.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, both. Yeah, I have some yarrow in the tea.
Yeah, you really came prepared.
Like calling them in.
Yeah.
um, yeah, so and this is actually catnip, yarrow, and
Mm.
rose, which
Oh,
I love.
lovely.
Love that combo too. But I do work with them in tincture form, and also
Mm.
prefer the fresh tincture when possible. And as you said, yeah, the taste, the aromatics, like it feels like, when you're like sitting with like a fresh yarrow, and like I love just like um, you know, gently like rubbing like a little bit of like the leaf, and just like,
Mm.
just bringing that, like the first yarrow of the season, I feel like is
Hmm.
just such a, oh, it's just such a great feeling, great experience, and that really does come through with the fresh tincture.
Hmm.
So I add them a lot too, and that's interesting that this theme is coming through too. One of the formulas that I'm really thinking about right now is one I work with often for like menstrual cramping and moontime cramping and things like that. And there are other herbs in there also, but I find them to be really beautifully paired with, I think it's like black haw, rose, cinnamon, peony, to just bring some of that,
That's
yeah, that
lovely.
relief. And
Mm.
yeah, they're pretty potent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's lovely. Thank you for sharing that. You've also shared with us a beautiful oxymel, which I think this oxymel recipe just sounds very interesting, very unique, and it's a heart and boundaries oxymel.
Mhm.
Would you share a little bit about that with us?
Yeah, I love oxymels, and I know everyone has maybe different thoughts on oxymels and working with them. I find them to be really accessible for people who may not be able to tolerate alcohol for various reasons, and not quite as sweet as like glycerates, and then not everyone can kind of source like a organic like glycerin. So oxymels can be a fun like kitchen medicine, kitchen herbalism, where we can really work with like the folk methods and experiment and play, which I think, even within the clinical aspect of working with plants and herbalism, that play can just really help us connect with the plants and with our hearts, which is medicine also. And so this formula is hawthorn, yarrow, rose, and then cinnamon. So very moving, very connected with our hearts, holding those boundaries. So I find, um, well, yarrow, rose, and hawthorn are probably three of the plants that I work with the most for like boundaries, and whether that's like energetic boundaries, or of course yarrow, strengthening the vasculature. And so if we think of that, like our vasculature is really, like holding our blood. So they're really holding those very physical boundaries within our
Mhm.
bodies. And so I love working with yarrow, like as a flower essence, or the plant, the full plant, for kind of holding those energetic boundaries. So for very sensitive or highly sensitive people, they were one of the first flower essences that I worked with. And so this formula really brings some of that boundary medicine in for sensitive people, so energetically, but then also really supporting circulation, so moving blood. So if we're feeling like there's a lot of like stuck or stagnant energy, it can be a really beautiful one to work with. And then of course the heart medicines, with hawthorn and rose. So I think so many of us, myself included, are really feeling pulled to heart medicines right now, and really needing that extra support of our hearts, and coming back to our hearts, and easing some tension held in our hearts, and easing some tension held in our bodies. And so this formula also brings in some of that heart medicine, so that we can continue showing up in the ways that we're called, and have like, I find the plants can help us to feel held, so that there's like that vulnerability in connecting, but yet we're held. So there's like that container, that the plants are holding for us as well, so that we can be open in our relationships, and really connect from our heart spaces. Yeah. And then
Mhm.
the cinnamon is,
Oh,
yeah,
that's
moving.
beautiful.
Yeah, thank you.
I am a huge fan of oxymels. I drink them all the time, and also a big fan of kitchen medicine. So I loved everything you shared. And I make oxymels of all different kinds, but I make gallons of hawthorn oxymel,
Mm-hmm.
and that's just kind of our staple. Here we have our black hawthorn as the native hawthorn, so
Mm-hmm.
it's the color from that comes into the oxymel is just so vivaciously red. It's just so beautiful. And I've never made, I don't think, an oxymel with yarrow. And so I'm really, really excited for this recipe. I feel like this is just my personal class because I've already chosen yarrow as my plant ally this year, and you're just giving me all this
Mm-hmm.
inspiration and pointing me in these wonderful directions. And yeah, this just looks absolutely beautiful, and I'm really excited to try it. So thank you for sharing that with us. And for all the listeners, you can go to Rosalee, herbswithrosalee.podcast.com to download your beautiful illustrated recipe card or check out the show notes as well. Was there anything else you'd like to share about Yarrow before we move on, Jacqui?
Yeah, I think maybe with the recipe, just there's a lot of astringency in that in that recipe. So just keeping in mind if there's some dryness, to kind of find ways to balance that or work with them, maybe just in drop doses in smaller amounts. But that's one aspect that I love about their medicine too, is that tonifying astringent action. But I think, yeah, nothing else really. I mean, we could. There's so much more, but also I'm feeling, yeah, this is a good place.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again for sharing so much about Yarrow. And I love the stories, and just having like your connection come through as well is just really beautiful. Well, I would love to talk more about, I feel like we heard your plant story and, your background, but there's so much that you do with plants that I personally would love to hear about. I would love to hear about your gardens. I would love to hear about your medicines that you make. And, I have more stuff too, but let's just start there. I'll try not to overwhelm you.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm excited. As we near spring, I'm opening Grow Your Own Medicine again this year. So it's one of my favorite offerings, as it's how I began, learning about and working with herbs and herbal medicine, is really through sitting with them and through growing them, even like in pots or in, ways that we're able to, and really learning from them and connecting with them in that way. And then there's a lot of kitchen medicine through Grow Your Own Medicine as we start the seeds. So I send out seed packs,
Cool.
and so we each start our own like medicine garden. So we're growing together, and then we go through the whole harvesting process, the ritual, the ceremony, the ancestral connection, as well as clinical applications, and then medicine making. So there's plant recipe book, so bringing them into our homes and our kitchens, and so it really feels like a full kind of circle offering, and ways that I learned and continue to learn about the plants and work with the plants.
What I love about that is like the community aspect of it, that it's like a grow your own medicine, but it sounds like there's a lot of support and community within it as well, which I just really love.
Yes, yeah, thank you. I do too, and it feels like such an important part, like community with one another, with humans, and then community with the plants, and yeah, all of the more than human beings as well. And then also gearing up for the big like spring update. So I make seasonal plant remedies, and so I usually do 2 really kind of like large updates a year, and I call them kind of updates, plant medicine drops, where there's just like an abundance of the plant medicines that are really coming forward that season. And so that's usually the end of May. And so I'm probably most excited for magnolia flowers, the magnolia oxymel, to bloom. Yeah, and get making those and sharing those. So yeah.
Well, so the other thing, well, actually, first, let me go back for the Grow Your Own Medicine. How can folks find out more about that? I'll put it at the end too, but I just want to say it right now because I just feel like people are like, oh, I want that. So how can they contact you about that?
Yeah, thank you. So you can go to my website. So just hellishmedicines.com, and then go under courses, and you'll see Grow Your Own Medicine. So the doors open for that around the spring equinox. Yeah, so we'll get planting together around then, or through social media. So you can always message me and DM me through Among the Wildflowers or Hellish Medicines on Instagram.
And that's the next thing I wanted to say. We will put all those links in the show notes for sure, make it easy for folks. And so before we went live, I was kind of fangirling a bit on your social media because it's so beautiful. First of all, just there's a beauty that shines through in just a very real, authentic way. And I'm saying beauty like the visuals are so beautiful. But what you have to share there, you're like a shining light on social media. And you just have this like guiding light that comes through about connection to the earth, connection to ourselves, connection to community, connection to the plants. And you really, I can just say, I feel like your heart is there, and it really shows, and it really comes up as just like a powerful sharing on these social media posts, which I just feel like is like, well done, well done. And so I really want to encourage everybody. We'll put all the links there in the show notes too, to find you on Instagram. And And it's like, I feel, with all the algorithms, and I'm not on social media, I don't spend a lot of time on social media.
Mhm.
And yours is someone I keep like going back to, like I keep looking up again and like making sure that you're staying in my algorithm so that I get your messages. So I highly recommend that folks follow you there as well.
Oh,
And
thank you.
yeah, thank you. And yeah, your medicines, your seasonal medicines, your updates, they're just so beautiful. I can see from people's comments that they're just very well received and people are
Mm.
looking forward to them and relying on them as medicine as well.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you. I love that aspect too of, and again, bringing in that community piece of, like, I feel like it's like this shared, yeah, excitement of,
Mm.
which plants are coming and yeah, working with them and being able to, rely on them in a way of working with them, through seasonal shifts. So
Mm.
thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Jacqui. Well, before you go, I have one more question for
Mhm.
you. And that question is, how do herbs instill hope in you?
Mm, I love this question so much too. It's such a beautiful one, and I think hope is such a needed feeling and experience right now. And I feel like we could again speak for hours on this as well, and how the plants really instill hope and remind us of that hope. Whether like we've planted a seed and we, kind of watch them come to life and then bloom and harvest medicine. There's so much like hope in that energetic aspect of like that renewal and that trust, that even after like these long winters or periods of hibernation, that there will be life and that blooming. And so, I think we can maybe all connect with like those first flowers, that come up. So snowdrops, maybe like some of the first flowers, or the magnolia, blooms on the trees, lilac, like just that feeling, that we really experience in our entire beings, of like that hopefulness that comes through. And so I feel like the plants really, really embody that energy just by being who they are, which is such a potent reminder for us also. And then, of course, working with herbal remedies for healing, and for supporting our physical, mental, spiritual, emotional bodies, whether we give like a salve or a tincture and we see someone's like life change sometimes, and feeling more ease, or relieving pain in their bodies, and just um, that hope for healing and that hope for renewal in whatever way that looks. Because healing can mean so many different things, but kind of just like that returning to harmony, and that potential, that there's just so much beauty here, and we can forget sometimes, but there's so much beauty and renewal, here, and the plants really really show us that, and teach us how to embody that and how to remember that, and how to, really care for one another with that energy, and remembering as well. Yeah. So.
Oh, Jacqui, that's so beautiful. Yeah. And it's, you said like sometimes we can forget. And I would say, again, like that's something that comes through you. Like, I feel like you're reminding us a lot, and just the work that you're putting out into the world and the gifts you're
Mm-hmm.
putting out into the world, just that reminder. So thank you for that. And I like that you chose the word harmony too, because I think of Yarrow as a harmonizer, harmonizes the blood. And so it's kind of
Mm-hmm.
a nice, like, follow through with that. And yeah, and all the spring and the renewal. I was right there with that for you as well. There's here we have lots of snow on the ground still.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's it's kind of that like maddening time of year where I'm trying to like be present. This is a beautiful time too, but the like spring is around the corner, and so it's hard. But today I heard my first Say's Phoebe. I always pay attention to when the Phoebes first show up, and also my first Robin. And so both
Mm-hmm.
of them showed up today. And so hearing like you like talking about, the renewal, the seeds,
Mm-hmm.
the flowers, the spring, it's coming. I was just like, yes, yes. And I do feel hope and inspiration for that. So
Yeah.
yeah, thank you. That was such a beautiful sharing. It's been so lovely to get to know you. And I'm really grateful that you spent this time with us. And thank you so much for all the beautiful gifts you put into this world. Thank you so much for sharing with us too.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. It was so nice to connect and share a little bit more, and yeah, chat about Yarrow. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Jacqui. Thanks for being here. Don't forget to head over to the show notes at herbswithrosaleepodcast.com to download your beautifully illustrated recipe card. There, you'll also be able to sign up for my weekly newsletter, which is the best way to stay in touch with me. You can find more about Dr. Jacqui at her website, halishmedicines.com. If you'd like more herbal episodes to come your way, then one of the best ways to support this podcast is by subscribing on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. I deeply believe that this world needs more herbalists and plant-centered folks, and I'm so glad that you're here as part of this herbal community. Also, a big round of thanks to the people all over the world who make this podcast happen week to week. Emily Thomas Anderson is the project manager who oversees the entire podcast operation, from guest outreach to writing show notes and on and on. I often tell people, I just show up. Emily does most of the heavy lifting. Nicole Paul is the operator for the entire Herbs with Rosalee school and community. She keeps an eagle-eye view on everything to ensure it's running smoothly. Francesca is our fabulous video and audio editor. She not only makes listening more pleasant, she also adds beauty to the YouTube videos with plant images and video overlays. Tatiana Rusakova is the botanical illustrator who creates gorgeous plant and recipe illustrations for us. I love them, and I know you love them. Once the illustration is ready, Jenny creates the recipe cards as well as the thumbnail images for YouTube. Alex is our behind-the-scenes tech support and social media manager, and Karen and Emily are our student services coordinators and community support. If you've written in with a question, undoubtedly you got help from them. For those of you who like to read along, Jennifer is who creates the transcripts each week. Xavier, my handsome French husband, is the cameraman and website IT guy. It takes an herbal village to make it all happen, including you. Thank you so much for your support through your comments, reviews, and ratings. One of my favorite things about this podcast is hearing from you. I read every comment that comes in, and I'm excited to hear your thoughts on Yarrow and this conversation. Okay, you've lasted to the very end of the show, which means you get a gold star and this herbal tidbit. Well, Yarrow is such a fascinating plant, especially in its ability to move blood and move stagnation. It's a favorite herb for many herbalists when working with menstrual cramps that are due to pelvic stagnation specifically. It's also commonly part of protocols for fibroids. Well, I went over to PubMed and just checked on there, and there was one study looking at Yarrow's effects on menstrual cramps or primary dysmenorrhea. So in this study, researchers in Iran conducted a clinical trial with female university students who experienced primary dysmenorrhea, which is painful periods. The participants were randomly divided into two groups. One received Yarrow tea, while the other got a placebo. They drank the tea for 3 days during 2 menstrual cycles, and then they rated their pain levels. What they found is that the group who took the Yarrow tea reported a significantly greater reduction in pain compared to the placebo group. And the difference was noticeable after 1 month, but it was even more significant after 2 months. So they concluded that drinking Yarrow tea can effectively reduce period pain in people with primary dysmenorrhea. Thank you for joining me on this herbal adventure. See you next time. First up is the Herbs with Rosalee Student Spotlight. Each week we take a moment to celebrate one of our amazing students and their inspiring contributions to our herbal learning community. This week our spotlight shines on Elia Seeley in Washington State. Throughout 2024, Elia was an insightful participant in our Rooted Medicine Circle course, sharing her deep curiosity and love for the plants. For her capstone project, Elia created a story quilt, this beautiful fusion of herbal learning and textile artistry. Though she was already a garment sewer, quilting was new territory for Elia, making this a project of both skill and discovery. Using tea-dyed muslin, applique, and embroidery, she stitched together her journey in Rooted Medicine Circle, layering it with inspiration from the course and a deep connection to her grandmother, who was a master gardener. To honor her contributions, Mountain Rose Herbs is sending Elia a $50 gift certificate to stock up on their incredible selection of sustainably sourced herbal supplies. Mountain Rose Herbs is my go-to for high-quality organic spices, herbal remedies, and even hard-to-find botanicals. They ship all over the U.S. and have a massive selection of products to fuel your herbal adventures. Thank you, Mountain Rose Herbs, for supporting our amazing students. If you'd like to explore Mountain Rose Herbs' offering and support this show, you can find the special link in the show notes.